خير إليك السعد قد جاك منك الجمال وذاك الحسن مسراك.
So the Ottoman Empire, may Allah reward them, did an amazing job in establishing Islam. Many Arabs, unfortunately, might have been misinformed about them because of the nationalism that they had been taught in school. They would say, you are an Arab, you are mighty and you're better than these Turks. This is what many people are taught in their schools. Up until today, in Egypt, this is what they were all taught. They were never taught a single thing about the Ottomans, how they were the heroes of Islam.
وابتهجت مما أتيت ولحن الحب أرواك فلتصعدي في سماء الخير وانطلقي.
By using domestic opposition to weaken, maybe even destroy it, Britain exploited a new movement sweeping through the empire: nationalism.
That idea spread to the Middle East as to other parts of the world in the latter part of the 19th century. So you had the beginnings in the Ottoman Empire of a Turkish nationalism.
This came to a head when the Young Turks took power in a coup in 1908.
لله أنت وما بالخير أحلاك هذه التحايا إليك الآن قد برزت تهوى رؤاك وعين الله ترعاك.
So all of this literary and nationalistic revival then took a much more political form, and therefore you got the emergence of Arab nationalism.
They would need an ally to support and arm them. The obvious candidate was Great Britain.
Now, why was the Caliphate destroyed? There is a shaitan called the Lawrence of Arabia, T.E. Lawrence, Thomas Edward Lawrence. Now, this person, his last name was Thomas Edward Chapman. He was a Jew, but he changed his name from Chapman to Lawrence to deceive unsuspecting Arabs about his roots. And he was gay, he was a homosexual. So not only was he a Jew, he was a homosexual. He traveled the Middle East extensively as a British soldier because he joined the British Army. To win the hearts of the Arabs, he became fluent in the Arabic language. After winning the hearts of the Arabs in 1918, he sowed the seeds of discord between the Arabs and the Turks. So he said to them, you are Arabs and they are Turks, they are inferior, so you should rise up against them.
His knowledge of Arabic and Arabia earned him a job in the British Army's intelligence section in Cairo. The British War Office saw that an Arab uprising could potentially destabilize the Turkish enemy. Lawrence's role gradually became more political.
By the summer of 1915, British intelligence confirmed that the Arab nationalist movement was the breakthrough the government was looking for. Britain and her French ally dispatched officers to sound out Arab leaders.
And various people were tempted as a result. If they thought they could actually gain independence, why not side with the Europeans against the Ottomans?
In the Hijaz, in western Arabia, Sharif Hussein, its ruler, was set on extending his political and geographical domain. He believed he might be able to do it with the help of the British.
Sharif Hussein was the leader of the Hashemites. He was the person responsible for Mecca and Medina. And although he had worked with the Ottomans before the First World War, once the First World War happened, he saw this was his chance.
A chance too for the British, who saw support for Sharif Hussein as a way to threaten the Sultan's hold on the Caliphate, the political leadership of the Islamic world. In July 1915, Sharif Hussein smuggled a message to the British High Commissioner in Cairo, Sir Henry McMahon, offering to raise a substantial Arab force against the Ottomans in return for British support for Arab independence. Taking Britain's assurances of support at face value, Hussein, together with his sons Faisal and Abdullah, amassed a sizable force.
Lawrence became involved in gathering intelligence about the possible Arab revolt and helped to sponsor the idea of Arab insurrection. He headed north towards Wadi Safra to meet Amir Faisal. Their relationship would eventually drive the war in the desert.
He went there to the Middle East to create the revolt to dismantle the Khilafah system, because when the Caliph was approached in Istanbul, the Kuffar asked him to give them access to Palestine, and they were rebuffed. So they realized that they will not be able to get Palestine unless they are successful in destroying the Islamic Empire. The British gave the Arabs artillery, modern weapons which the Turks didn't have. So the Turks were defeated by the Arab revolt.
October 1917. Lawrence and the Arab army were concentrating their guerrilla attacks on the Hijaz Railway, disrupting the Turkish supply routes.
يقول لورنس رجل المخابرات الإنجليزي الذي يسميه العرب ملك العرب غير المتوج في كتابه عقيدة الحكمة السبعة، يقول: لقد كنت أؤمن إيمانا عميقا أن فكرة القومية هي الكفيلة بتفكيك تركيا.
The new army was commanded by the young and charismatic Faisal, who had captured the imagination of the Arab masses in the quest for Arab independence.
حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد.
Yet even as Hussein and Faisal mobilized their troops, the British were preparing to sell them short. Unaware of these secret dealings behind their backs, Hussein and Faisal proclaimed independence. Hussein stayed loyal to the Allied cause, still prepared to accept Britain's word on Arab independence.
The Arab revolt did contribute to the victory of the Allies. First of all, it protected the British flank in Palestine. The British could have never legitimized what they were doing unless they had the blessing of a particular Arab force.
So the British and their allies imposed a new settlement on the territories they now dominated. They recognized Sharif Hussein in a kingdom of the Hijaz, and with their help, 2 of his sons would become kings of Transjordan and Iraq.
Now, the British stabbed the Arabs in the back by giving Palestine to the Jews with a declaration called the Balfour Declaration. They carved up the entire Middle East between themselves, between the French and the British.
في التاريخ المسجل الملك عبد العزيز يقول نحن ذهبنا الى الاحساء وخذناها من الاتراك لما عرفنا وعلمنا عن تدهورهم. فكان يهاد الانجليز على حساب القوة الضاربة الموجودة في داخل بلاده اللي هي الاتراك.
هل صحيح كان يتقاضى راتب من البريطانيين؟
نعم طبعا معقول يعطوا راتب 5000 جنيه في ذلك الوقت الانسان في الصحراء مبلغ ضخم. هل ممكن يعطوها كذا لوجه الله؟ لا، هم يعطوه لغرض في نفسه.
The lines were redrawn by 2 ambitious young diplomats, Britain's Sir Mark Sykes and France's François-Georges Picot.
Poring over a map of the Levant, Sykes and Picot personally drew in the areas they wished to see under their control. Their secret deal amounted to the virtual carve-up of the Middle East.
That's the reason we've got such a mess in the Middle East today. A series of lines literally drawn on a map to divide up the spoils of World War I, which has led to hundreds of thousands of deaths and decades of instability.
The Versailles Peace Conference was concluded on June the 28th, 1919, with the creation of the League of Nations, the first global institution for peace and security. Its covenant provided that the Arab and other territories ceded by the defeated Ottoman Empire should be administered by mandates, which meant, in effect, that Britain and France were given the authority to impose their rule over the Arab territories. On November the 21st, 1919, François-Georges Picot, the co-architect of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and the French General Gouraud arrived in Beirut.
وابتهجت مما أتيت ولحن الحب أرواك.
One other aspect of kufr and shirk that we find ourselves immersed in, and that is the call to nationalism. It is that call that divides us, where people stand up and they call to the call of Jahiliyyah. Everyone now is fighting and calling people to their nationality and to their nation, as if they are better and superior because of the country that was devised for them by who? By the kuffar, subhanallah.
As the Ottoman Empire continued to fail, a power vacuum developed that the British and the French were only too happy to exploit. Both nations were establishing their own spheres of influence in the region, competing with each other and challenging the Ottoman Empire for control of the Middle East. From these troubled times, a new leader emerged. His name, Mustafa Kemal.
قد أعلن الكفر بالله العظيم صراحة، كفر بالله صراحة، وفعل من الأفعال ما تقشعر منه جلود المؤمنين، ويستغرب المرء كيف استطاع هذا الذئب الأغبر أن يفعل في تركيا ما فعل.
The fact that the Ottomans sided with Germany in World War I is huge. It's with us even till today, because they chose the losing side of the war.
The leader of this post-World War I movement was Mustafa Kemal, who emerged from the war as the only undefeated Turkish commander.
Mustafa Kemal became a national hero.
Parliament offered Kemal the Sultanate and the Caliphate, but he had other ideas. Kemal shocked Parliament by abolishing both sacred titles. He threatened his colleagues that if the proposition was not carried, some heads would be cut off. Fights broke out. Some politicians fired guns on each other, but Kemal won.
Mustafa Kemal abolished the Ottoman Sultanate and exiled the last of the Ottoman sultans, and that officially was the end of the dynasty.
After more than 600 years, the Sultanate of the Ottoman Empire was over.
واستطاع تحت هذه الهالة أن ينتزع الحكم وأن يفعل من الأفعال ما لم يفعله رجل قبله ولا رجل بعده، بحيث إنه ألغى الأذان بالعربية، وظل الأذان ينادى به على المناير باللغة التركية الجديدة سنوات طويلة جدا.
Kemal separated church from state. Religious garb was banned. Ottoman clothing, and in particular the fez, was forbidden throughout Turkey.
وأجبر الناس على الزي الأوروبي، وأجبر النساء على ترك الحجاب إجبارا لا هوادة فيه، تطبيق بأحكام عسكرية لا تقبل الرحمة ولا الشفقة ولا الهوادة.
As part of his effort to westernize the country, Kemal introduced a new alphabet. Complex Ottoman Arabic was replaced by the Latin alphabet of Western languages. Kemal instructed all Turks to adopt traditional Western-style last names.
اختصار ساق تركيا نحو أوروبا وطبق القانون الأوروبي السويسري بحذافيره في أوروبا، وفعل من الكفر ما لم يفعله أحد قبله ولا بعده.
The end of the Ottoman Sultanate was a major event in Middle Eastern history. It is an event that the area is still wrestling with.